My name is Ben Mattis, and I'm the producer on Prince of Persia 3. Before Prince of Persia 3, I worked for 4.5 years in the wireless gaming industry, a year and a half of which was spent at Gameloft, Ubisoft's sister company. And at Gameloft, we worked primarily on taking Ubisoft branded titles and porting them, if you will, to the wireless gaming space. We wanted to lay the foundation, which we did with Sands of Time, and we created the foundation of an action-adventure game that was primarily based on adventure, platforming, and puzzle solving with a basic combat sort of mechanic. But once that foundation was built upon, Warrior Within and now Prince of Persia 3 are adding to that. We've maintained the platforming element and have added sort of incremental improvements both in Warrior Within and in Prince of Persia 3, but we really feel that that's just been the foundation upon which things like the speed kill system and the freeform fighting system really add to. We've always had the ambition to create complementary gameplay mechanics, so we never felt like these new things that we were adding didn't merge well with the idea of a platforming, puzzling game. The theme of Sands of Time was certainly one of sort of innocence shattered. So the prince was, non-tested in the field of combat. He was a little bit naive. It was sort of this story of his mistakes born of that naivety, causing this huge problem, this colossal releasing of the sands, which basically destroyed ruined the world, if you will, and him sort of trying to atone for those mistakes and address the problem. If you see his personality in that game, it's really one of the young, naive prince who's sort of learning about the world and learning about the consequences of his actions, never really taking responsibility for those actions. And then if you look at Warrior Within, there's a little bit of an evolution, or a lot of an evolution. You have a much more jaded, darker prince. A bunch of time has passed since Sands of Time. He's seen a lot more, he's done a lot more, he's got a lot more on his shoulders, and he's certainly a lot more jaded, he's a lot darker, he's a lot more reckless and ruthless. If you look at the style of combat in Warrior Within, it focused a lot on combat and sort of the gritty, dark nature of the prince. So the theme there was much more one of maturity, perhaps of the sort of attitude of having seen it all and being a little bit jaded. And then the theme in the third one, in Prince of Persia 3, is really the evolution of the epic hero. So we've created the story of a naive prince, a jaded prince, and now we have the split, the light prince and the dark prince, which literally allow us to concentrate the good into one form and the bad into another form. And yes, this is the closing of the Sands of Time trilogy. I certainly think fans can expect to see more of Prince of Persia in coming years, but this is the end of the Sands of Time trilogy. When this game wraps up, there is a very firm, conclusive conclusion to the story, to all the main characters. We finally find out what happens to the prince. We finally find out what happens, for example, to Kailina and what becomes of the Sands of Time. And it wraps things up in a very neat and clean way. Leaves a little bit to the imagination, but I think certainly gives all of the answers to the most burning questions that fans have had over the last 2.5 years. Of course, it's been a difficult challenge because we always want everything we do to tie back to what makes the prince the prince. I mean, he's a very distinctive personality, and we don't ever want to depart from that. Every new gameplay feature that we add to the game has to feel like it's realistic, given what people know about the prince's abilities and his history and his character personality. And also that fits within the theme, within the era, if you will. And that also has a little bit of the Prince touch, so maybe a little bit of sarcasm and wit in terms of dialogue and whatnot, but also maybe a little bit of acrobatic abilities, combat mastery. So, if we take something, for example, like the chain on the Sand Prince, which he uses in his freeform fighting system. This is something that we really wanted to have a Prince touch to. We wanted it to really feel like This is an acrobatic combat master who happens to have this additional weapon at his disposal. So when he's doing his moves, that you still really feel that sort of sense of fluid motion, of real sort of mastery over his body and what it's capable of doing. And so the moves are very graceful, they're very dramatic. There's a lot of sort of flourishes and finishing moves that people who are familiar with, for example, the freeform fighting system of Warrior Within will look at and say, yeah, you know what? That's the Prince of Persia. Maybe it's the Dark Prince, but it's the Prince of Persia nonetheless. We see his acrobatic skills and we see what we love about the Prince in this new combat system. So that's just an example of how whenever we've added any new gameplay feature, we've always brought it back to the question of, does this fit within the theme of Prince of Persia as a whole? And is this something that the Prince as a character would actually do? And in every case, the answer is, I hope the fans will agree, always yes.